What's going on, everyone? So, in the upcoming Scream 7, we're supposed to get the introduction of Mark Kincaid, the husband. Right? Obviously, we're familiar with the character. Obviously, we know the character, but we do not know Sidney and Mark's relationship. But Mark is expected to return, or well, Patrick Dempsey is supposed to reprise the role as Mark Kincaid. However, there are rumors going around, and again, always take everything with a grain of salt, but there are rumors going around that he will be in a very limited role. That this film is supposed to be very Sidney and Gale focused. That, they're supposed to be kind of the driving force of this film. But, to me, it's like, okay, cool. We got Mark and Cade. You established this storyline and narrative in Scream 5. You got to at least, bring that to light. At least give us a little look and insight. Give us a little peek into the curtain. Can't just set something like that up for such an impactful storyline to just not deliver on it, right? This isn't some random guy. This is the detective that helped her in Scream 3 take out her brother, Roman, and they kind of hinted and flirted at the idea of these two kind of being romantically involved at some point, and then you kind of make that do tie in, and then, and it's Sidney Prescott, and it's like, man, she's found love, she's found happiness, she has children. Man, was she even able to have children? That's crazy. You can't just set up the idea of Sidney having children and a husband and not deliver on it. So I hope it's not something that they just kind of sweep under the rug, because that would be incredibly frustrating. But I digress, right? I could see the potential of a sort of babysitter for Sidney's children, right? Now, again, we don't there are rumors that there's supposed to be a babysitter, and even an interview at this point and whatnot. And I've explored and talked about the idea of the babysitter ending up being the killer and going after Sidney Prescott. That's how they get close to Sidney and the kids and all that stuff. But I want to kind of talk and explore the opposite end of that. And that's being that maybe Sidney has a babysitter who they establish, set up the story, and create her as the sort of new face going forward, the new Sam type character. Right? Now, again, all I have to go on are rumors that are circulating. And one of the rumors that are circling is that they're not really going to establish that next character. They're just going to they want to build a new trilogy with Sidney and Gale. But even then, right, that's fine, but it would be nice to at least have some characters that are established that are you just going to have Sidney and Gale in every film and then just introduce 10 new characters every time? Is that really the route and approach that we're going to have here? Or are you going to do something where, no, Sidney and Gale are going to maintain and be the focus, be the final girls, but there are going to be other characters, at least one or two that we establish and build and kind of get thrown into the mix and all that, right? And you could have something where, and I like the babysitter idea as kind of being that character, because I think that there's a lot of things that you can do with that character, right? You can make her a very convincing red herring. Right? Because it kind of would follow the kind of Scream trope, right? So it'd make it believable that oh, wow, this is the killer. Maybe there's even a scene or something where, it's oh, wow, it's really the babysitter. But really at the end of it all, it doesn't. You kind of have this double whammy. Or maybe the babysitter even knows who the killers are and is familiar with the killers and stuff like that, right? You could do some fun creative things to kind of have this babysitter kind of be the distraction, have the babysitter kind of be the red herring, and also be a part that kind of drives the story, but at the end is one of the survivors, actually helps Sidney and ends up saving Sidney at some point, right? I think that is definitely an approach in which they can take, and I think would be a lot of fun and make a lot of sense, right? Because if they introduce a babysitter, right, and the babysitter is involved, and you have the babysitter as this red herring and all of that, right, yada, right, the problem is it becomes incredibly predictable. And, like, you could argue, okay, well, like, all Scream 5 and 6 have been predictable. It's just, you kind of know what to expect. And look, I do think that there is an argument. If you've seen enough horror movies, particularly Scream, you know, right? Like, you kind of have an idea. Right? But I also don't want it to be, like, insanely predictable. Like, you don't even have to try to be predictable, right? Like, you know, and that's kind of how The Babysitter would feel. The Babysitter would kind of feel like, okay, like, you guys didn't even try. Right? Like, you just kind of like, let's just make the Babysitter one of the killers. I like the idea of kind of establishing the Babysitter as this character that has a relationship with Sidney Prescott, wants to help Sidney, wants to help her family. She is kind of the new Sam character, but she doesn't have to be like the face or the lead going forward. But you could also use her as the tie-in and connection to consistently bring Sidney into the fold, right? So, like, you could even have the story, yes, be targeted at Sidney, but everything kind of stems from the Babysitter character. That makes sense, right? Like, so, yes, like, the mission and the goal is to take out Sidney. However, we're using the Babysitter as the entry point to establish that or get that done from a Ghostface perspective, right? And so, and you can kind of replicate that model in different ways going forward if the plan is to have Sidney and Gale be the main catalyst and be the main focus, and in particular Sidney going forward. But you also establish and set yourself up for that next wave post Sidney and Gale, and also kind of give you some insurance if Nev or Courtney at some point go, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore, right? Like, and maybe it's not even like they just don't want to do Scream anymore. Maybe they get another gig or they do something else, right? Like, there's a million ways that things kind of become unexpected. I mean, Scream 6, the plan was Sidney Prescott to be in that movie. And guess what? She wasn't, right? The plan for Scream 7 was Sam and Tara to be in this movie. And guess what? They're not, right? Like, so, again, plans don't always work out, right? You have an idea, you have a vision, you have a concept, you have a direction in which you want to go. Those change, you know? And so, to me, it's like, if you can build, okay, like, if you don't want to build characters to the point where they are now the focus, fine. But I still think you need to build characters to the point to where you have more story to tell. And you have that safety net. And you have the things necessary going forward, right? Like, I mean, but that's just storytelling in movies, period, right? Like, you know, look at Scream 96, for example, right? You had Sidney and the main overarching story, but you also had other stories. You had, like, Gale and Dewey and their story, and then their story together. You had Tatum and, like, what she's going to Stu and what he's got going on. Randy was another kind of story in which, you know, his love for Sidney Prescott and, you know, him doing the thing, right? Like, so, again, good storytelling, good establishment. You can have this be Sidney focus. You can have this, the overarching story and plot and just the driving force to this film is Sidney Prescott. Fine. You know, it is Gale. Okay, fine. But I think to kind of build and establish that underlining character, you know, that almost Randy-esque story where, okay, there's more to this character. I mean, even like Scream 4, you had, like, the Sidney story. You had the Gale and Dewey story. You had the Kirby and the Jill story, right? Like, so you could have Sidney and Gale be the main story, but then have that kind of Jill-esque story with Sidney and her babysitter, right? And I think it could work. I think you can make it make sense. And I think it could all kind of flow rather nicely, in my opinion. And I don't know. I want to see the establishment of characters beyond just Sidney and Gale. Because again, like, what are you going to do? You're going to just, every movie, you're reintroducing 9 to 10 new characters, which, I mean, Scream usually does anyway. But you also have those returning characters that you can connect to. You usually have those returning characters that you can kind of, follow into the next film. Like, I just think you need to maintain that personally. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion, and I pass the question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? How do you feel with your thoughts? Do you like the idea of, like, the babysitter kind of being an ally? You can kind of set her up to be the red herring and kind of set her up to be the bad guy, but ultimately, no, it's not. It's the good guy, right? Is there anything specific you'd want to see from that standpoint or that story? Do you agree that, like, you need to establish some other characters besides Sidney and Gale? Again, however you feel, whatever your thoughts are, I'd love to hear it. So let me know down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me a lot. So we enjoy these types of videos. Truly appreciate it. Not subscribe channel. What are you doing? Hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. I appreciate y'all. See you in the next one. Thank you.